Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. The first time I met my guest, he was wearing green tights with red and green matching shoes and a hat that had little bells on it. Just another Saturday night in St. Paul, Alberta, am I right? Okay, he was dressed up as an elf working as a server at my staff Christmas party. A few months later, he would be joining me on the St. Paul Dodge staff in the sales department, and since then, I've learned he's trained in a few martial arts, shares a passion with me for endurance sports, and is a bit of a fitness fanatic. He's only one letter away from having a Bare Naked Lady song written about him. Pleased to welcome my friend and coworker, someone completely interesting, Ryan Wilson.
Lying in bed, just like Ryan Wilson. Heard that many of times.
Didn't you have a teacher in when you went to high school?
Yeah, my shop teacher every day would sing that song to me when I would walk in.
All right, Ryan, we've worked together now. Is it about 4 years now?
Yeah, I just hit 4 years.
Congratulations.
Yes.
All right. Let's go a little bit before we knew each other. You grew up in Saskatchewan, correct?
Swift Current. Yeah.
All right. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Swift Current.
I was born and raised in Swift Current. Skateboarded my whole life. Played baseball. I was a bit of a bad kid in school, always in the principal's office. And then when I got to high school, that's when I found wrestling. And wrestling kind of made me develop a little bit more discipline, along with my girlfriend, who is now my wife. She snapped me into shape and made me actually participate in school. So that was kind of a good thing, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
When you started wrestling, besides the discipline aspect, is that what kind of fueled your interest into more martial arts? Because what do you have discipline in? Jiu-jitsu you've trained in?
Jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, lots of wrestling.
Okay.
More grappling than stand-up, but yeah.
Okay.
So I blue belt in Jiu-jitsu, and I've done Muay Thai for several years. So.
Have you ever actually competed in
Jiu-jitsu and wrestling? I have, but not in actual hand-to-hand combat. But I also worked as a bouncer, so I have a lot of non-official fights, I guess you could say.
Well, I was more implying that Muay Thai is a very interesting sport too.
Well, Muay Thai is kind of what I'm the most interested in, but probably the less skilled. I'm more skilled at grappling.
Right.
But a buddy and I actually traveled to Thailand and trained in Muay Thai for a month there.
Right.
So that was like one of the cooler experiences because that's obviously the homeland of Muay Thai. But
weren't you at the same facility as the world champion or something?
Tons of world champions.
Oh, tons of world champions.
Yeah, like probably dozens of UFC fighters and high-level Muay Thai fighters train at that gym.
So is it just because you're at a point where you're not in a location where you can actually have the proper training to move on to a more competitive aspect, or?
Yeah, actually, when we first moved to St. Paul, I was driving to St. Albert 3 times a week and doing training with the intention of starting to fight. Mm-hmm. But it just, when winter hit, it became too much to travel that often. So I gave it up for other things, I guess.
Going back, I guess, a little bit to growing up, is there any stories that you have growing up in Swift Current that kind of stand out for you as memorable besides just the general getting into trouble?
I mean, I have lots of stories.
That's what I'm
from
getting.
Beforehand. I think you know some of them. But yeah, from before grade 10, it was a lot of mischief and a lot of troublemaking. And then, after grade 10 is kind of when I got serious about school and what came after high school and stuff. So
when you moved on from high school, what was your focus then? Did you go to post-secondary school or?
Yeah, initially I was going to the U of S for a biology degree.
Okay.
And we had moved to Saskatoon and I lived there for 4 years and went to school for 2 years and decided it wasn't really what I wanted to do and school wasn't necessarily the best thing for me.
Right. So because of your wife's education. She's an optometrist.
Yeah.
That took you to some different places and gave you some different experiences. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So after we spent our 4 years in Saskatoon, my wife graduated with, let me get this right, an anatomy and cell biology degree with the intention on getting an optometry degree, which we had to move to the United States for. So we moved to Indiana and lived there for 3 years while she did her degree there. And then we spent the last year moving around the country and got to live and see a lot of cool different spots. So, yeah.
What were some of the eye openers or some of your favorite things about living in the U.S.?
I guess a lot of people in the U.S. are pretty ignorant to the way of life in Canada. That was apparent. I mean, right away. But yeah, I actually love living in Indiana. We lived in a place where the population is 80,000 and 40,000 of those people are students.
Right.
So as early 20s man, it was a pretty fun place to live for the duration that we lived there. So yeah.
You had gotten involved with some of the local sports and stuff like that too, you had mentioned?
So yeah, when I wrestled throughout high school kind of, and then when we moved to the US, I made friends with the wrestling coach down there and was the assistant wrestling coach for the middle school and the high school as well. So that was really cool. I did that for all 3 years. I think that we lived 2 or 3 years that we lived in Indiana. So, I also did my nutrition schooling while we lived down there.
Okay.
So that was kind of what kept me busy while I was there. And then I would actually come home in the summer to work and save some money. And yeah.
What was there a big difference in, I guess, the ideology and philosophy of wrestling in the U.S. because it seems bigger down there than it is in Canada, or is it just something that,
It is completely different, actually. And in Canada, where I lived in Southwest Saskatchewan, it was big, but that's been one of the things that's kind of surprising in Alberta. It's not nearly as big as it is back home, but moving to the U.S., it's also a different style of wrestling.
Okay.
So in Canada, they primarily do freestyle wrestling, and then in the States, it's folk style. So it's a little bit different. The rules and stuff are kind of different, but for the most part, it's pretty similar. But going to some of the tournaments and competitions, like I remember we went to the NCAA championships in Indiana one year in Indianapolis, and there was I think almost 20,000 people in the place watching it. So definitely it's way more popular. And that was for not even that was high school. Actually, not the NCAAs. It was the high school nationals or whatever it was. So it was all the high schools in Indiana meeting at that place to do the final tournament of the year. So, but yeah, tons of people, tons of support. Obviously there's a lot of people in high school that are trying to get scholarships as well.
Right.
So it's very probably just much more competitive down there than up here. But
so when you your wife finished up her degree,
yep.
Was St. Paul when she got her first job? Is that what brought you here?
It was, yeah. We knew because she didn't do the US exams, so we knew we were moving back to Canada. She did the Canadian exams, and St. Paul is about 6 hours away from home, so it's kind of perfect. We can go home for weekends and stuff and see family, but we're not too close, which is a good thing. And yeah, I'm one of my best friends lived in the area. He lived in Manville at the time, so it kind of made sense she did the interview over the phone, and then we came here to check it out before we actually moved here, and yeah, it was history ever since.
Okay, I'm trying to squeeze the timeline in here correctly. You had worked for a zipline company as well at one time?
I did that 1 year as my last summer job.
Okay.
It was kind of I didn't have to make as much money that year, and I just wanted to do something fun. And then I actually managed it for 3 years after that.
Okay.
So that was what we first did when we moved to St. Paul. I would do that in the summers.
Where was that?
There's 2 spots. So one is down in Cypress Hills, Saskatchewan, which is actually where I spent most of my summers as a kid.
Right.
And then the other one is in Waskesiu, which is in Prince Albert National Park in northern Saskatchewan. So
I just think it's cool to be working around. Did you get to just like on your free time just do a lot of zip lining and
usually by the end of the day, you've done so many runs that you're like, it's not actually that fun to do it in your free time, but it was a very cool job. And yeah, I learned a ton actually working there that I use now. So yeah, I mean, it's a job where you're literally paid to have fun all day.
Right.
So the more fun you have, the better.
So let's give a little context to my intro there. The first time I don't even know if we actually technically met. I might have just ordered some drinks off you that night. Yeah. But we were hosting a Christmas party at the Twisted Fork in town. You worked there as a server.
Yep.
And just to go with the flow, I guess, for the evening, you and another waitress had dressed up as elves, yes. Christmas elves. But I don't want to dwell on that too much. Working in the service industry, like, was that something you just needed a job kind of thing, or was that?
So yeah, I was working at the zip line for the summer months. Obviously there's no zip lining in winter. So then I would come back here and work at the restaurant. And then I was also working as a personal trainer in the winter. So that was kind of my year. I had those 3 jobs that I did for a few years.
I guess for me, I would find that to be one of the toughest jobs to have. Dealing with people in that kind of way, and just like remembering orders and,
I always wrote things down. I have a terrible memory. So for me, if it was more than 2 people at a table, I had to write it down. There was no chance.
I guess in what I was going to serve up was a bit of a compliment. I always found you were a very good server at that restaurant.
Oh, nice.
So
yeah, I really did enjoy it. Actually, it was one of the better jobs that I've had or enjoyed, I guess.
Right.
And even though like when it would get really busy and everybody was kind of stressed, I kind of am able to keep a calm head in those situations. So even when it's a little bit more hectic and stuff, I was still able to enjoy it.
Right.
But, yeah.
I just find it interesting that it's certainly not a job that I mean, if I worked in a restaurant, I'd wash dishes or bus tables. That would be like the extent of it. But it's funny how you said you enjoyed it, because I think it's people that enjoy that kind of job that really excel at it and do really well.
Actually, I wasn't even intending on working there, to be honest with you. We were there for supper one night, and one of the girls, I don't even know what prompted her to ask me this, but like asked me where I worked, and I was just at the gym, and I wasn't really full-time hours at the gym. So she was like, well, if you want to come work here, I'm sure they would hire you. I was like, okay, well, I don't know what I would do here. Maybe cook or something.
Yeah.
And so I came in and talked to Debbie, the chef and owner, and she's like, well, do you want to be a server? You could make really good tips. And I was like, I guess. I've never done it before, but sure, like, let's go. Yeah.
I get, maybe there's just there's intuition in some that some people have, that, hey, this guy looks like he could wait tables and would wear an elf outfit if called upon.
I definitely will. Yeah, I would do it again too, just to be clear.
You had talked about when you were down in the States, you got your was it a certificate in nutrition, or how would you?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What motivated you to do that? Was it something that you always had to? Because you've always been into fitness, not just sports, but actual fitness. So was that something that?
Yeah. So when we lived in Saskatoon, I worked as a personal trainer for a year there.
Okay.
And then I kind of wanted to just continue my studies in nutrition. I was pretty overweight actually when I first got out of high school. I had like ballooned up to like 245, I think was my heaviest.
Right.
So I guess it was like that lifestyle change that obviously I didn't want to weigh that much. And I made some lifestyle choices and some changes, and nutrition was kind of the biggest thing to get me out of that slump. So it definitely snowballed into just being obsessed with nutrition and fitness. And yeah.
Obviously something that's carried on into other avenues now, like we talked a little bit about you have some background in the martial arts and more contact sports like that, but you've now gravitated toward, and this is something where we share a little bit of passion, just different venues, I guess, is I like my ultra distance running and you seem to like the water more.
Yeah.
What's the draw And you've done some pretty decent runs yourself. I mean, we've gone down to the same race down in Edgerton there by Wainwright. You like to do the kids 25K. I do the 50.
Yeah.
But swimming's a whole different beast. Like if you're swimming 10 kilometers, that's like running a marathon basically for.
Yeah, they say, well, a 10K is a marathon in the swimming world.
Right.
So it's kind of like a 4X type deal. So swimming would be or how should I say this? Running should be 4 times the distance
Right.
in equivalent. So a marathon in running would be 42 kilometers,
Yeah.
and in swimming it's 10. So
And you've done as far as 20 kilometers in the water?
20 kilometers I did, last summer. Yeah.
Okay, I don't get it. How do you, because I know and that took you how long? Sorry, 20 kilometers.
8 hours and 32 minutes.
So in order to do that, I know even running 4+ hours, you have to have hydration, you have to have nutrition. How does that work in the water? Because running is easy. You just pack it in your pockets on your pack and away you go. But when you're swimming, you can't exactly carry a hydro pack, and it's not very easy to eat a power bar in the water.
So on most of these swims, you bring nutrition with you, obviously.
Yeah.
And for me, on the 20K swim, I had one of my good friends came with me, and he was kind of in charge of that.
Right.
So you also, in swimming, you burn a lot more calories than you do in running.
Right.
Which is harder too, because in swimming, the gravity, because you're horizontal instead of vertical, can kind of give you some digestive issues.
Right.
So you have to be careful with what you're consuming. You can't really have too much like solid foods.
Right.
So a lot of goos and sports drinks and stuff is kind of what I gravitate to. And there's these things called stroopwafels, which is what I'm obsessed with when I do these swims. They kind of break up all the goos and all the drinks and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, but for something like that, it's usually every 20 minutes you kind of want to ingest something.
Yeah.
Because you have to stay on top of it. If you get behind, you can't really catch up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how do you do it? Well, like, because is there stipulations you have to remain in the water for the distance to count, so to speak, or?
Yeah. So, I mean, in a typical actual like marathon swim, you're not really supposed to wear a wetsuit either.
Right.
For some of those ultra distance ones, like a 20K is technically an ultra distance swim.
Yeah.
You definitely can. So, but for it to count officially, you're not supposed to touch the boat, which I never did touch the boat.
Right.
And then you're not supposed to have any propulsion or anything, which is part of the official marathon swim.
So you somehow tread water and eat your.
It actually
snack.
is pretty easy when
Okay.
you are wearing a wetsuit, because you can just stop and float.
Okay.
Essentially.
Okay.
So yeah, you tread water and take your nutrition and then keep on going.
You've done a few this year, and I don't know if you want to talk about all of them or not.
Yeah, we can talk about
Okay.
all of them. Yeah.
Okay, so the first one you did early in July here.
Yep.
How far was that one?
So the first one I did was in Elk Island. That was just a short one. It was 1,500 meters.
Okay.
Yeah.
You almost won that one too, except.
So it was kind of a different race. I started out really strong, and you had to swim around an island
Right.
and then swim back. And usually for these races, they have these giant orange buoys in the water.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you use to sight, like to make sure you're going the right direction.
Right.
But for this race, they didn't have any of those. And when I turned around the island to come back, I was probably 200 meters ahead of the person in second place.
Yeah.
And swimming strong, and was going to finish strong. And I thought I saw the island, but I was looking at a different island. And I ended up swimming 200 meters pretty much in the wrong direction entirely. And by the time I realized what I was doing, I looked, and the guy had passed me, and he won first place, and I came in second. So it was a learning experience, but whatever. It was my mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other race you did, I just want to talk about it because I think it's important people understand there's a lot of components and a lot of different ways that can affect performance in certain ways. So, was it just over a week ago?
Yep.
Okay, just over a week. You went out to Vancouver.
Yes.
I want to say it's Kitsilano Bay you were supposed to swim around.
Yeah, Kitsilano Beach. Yeah.
So you have a little bit of an issue with ocean water.
Apparently, yeah.
Is that
I found
okay?
that out.
So let's start with that. Is that something? So you didn't realize you had an issue with it, or you?
No, well, it's tricky because I have had the same issue in lakes where you're in the middle of the lake and maybe it's dark and you see something in the corner of your eye and it plays a trick on you, like, oh shit, what was that?
Yeah.
And it's just a mind game that you play when you're swimming in deep dark waters by yourself, and you're out there solo essentially. And to be clear, I had done 2 weeks prior to that, I had done a lake swim in BC and came in fourth in that swim.
Right.
And had done really, really well. It was a really enjoyable swim. And that was a 5 kilometer swim.
Right.
And then 2 weeks after that, I had gone to Vancouver to swim, and that was a 6 kilometer swim. And I had, I don't know, right from the very beginning of the swim, it was, the water was murky. And it was the first time I've been in like a murky ocean like that. So not really actually, like solo, and it just kind of played tricks on me. But I would say it was interesting because last year my wife and I had gone to Kona, or I guess it was 2 years ago, and I was swimming by myself with no wetsuit, with no people, and like completely by myself in the ocean where they do the Ironman.
Right.
And it was so clear and beautiful water that you could see the fish on the bottom of the ocean, and that didn't play any tricks on me because I could see everything.
Right.
But then in Vancouver, as soon as you get like far out there and it's murky and you can't really see and you're alone out there, like there's people swimming, but they're not that close to you when you're out in the water. And every shadow, every time the light would hit, and my mind was playing tricks on me over and over and over again. And I just like couldn't shut it off. I couldn't shut my brain off. And it's just anxiety. It's anxiety being out in the water and being nervous, I guess, about what may be.
Like you don't think it's an actual phobia?
I don't think it's a phobia. I think it's just, I don't think it's a phobia because I'm really comfortable in the ocean, like I said in Kona.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's something I have to figure out and work through because it's something I want to do even more.
Right.
So it was in Vancouver. It was supposed to be 4 1.5 kilometer loops.
Right.
And I had done the first loop. Yeah. And the entire time I was a nutcase. It was every few strokes I would see something, but nothing was there. And I would stop and it was bothering me so much mentally that I wasn't enjoying myself. Mm-hmm. And like I said, 2 weeks prior to that, I had done a swim and that was super enjoyable for me. Yeah. And this I wasn't having a good time. It wasn't enjoyable. And every loop you have to get out and go through a timing chip scanner. Right. And when I got out after the first loop, I chose not to go back in for a second loop and DNF'd that race.
Did you have anybody there to talk to about it at all? Was your wife on hand for that one?
No, I had gone to Vancouver solo because we have a puppy. So my wife stayed home to take care of the dogs. So I was at that race by myself, and I went out for dinner actually with a friend who lives in Vancouver after that. And her and I were talking about it, and she's like, do you think if somebody was there, you would have like just got back in the water? Because there's somebody there watching you. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I think I probably would have. And actually, as soon as I took my timing chip off my ankle and I sat down and got a drink and then I took my wetsuit off, I literally, as soon as I did that, I regretted not going back in the water.
Because I can say I've been there, not because of anything like what you experienced as like an irrational reaction or anxiety to it, but there's moments in these ultra distance races that I've had, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But there's those times where you have that someone, like I have a guy that supports me.
Yep.
Just having them ask you a couple of times, "Are you sure? Are you sure?"
Yeah.
And I've said, no, I'm done. And then he's like, okay. And then leave me alone for 5 minutes. And then 5 minutes later, how do you feel now? You know what? I think I actually can get back out there.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just having that person just don't, he's in charge of surrendering my chip is kind of essentially how I put it.
Yeah.
He knows me well enough in that sense. So that's why I asked, if you had that coach or something there.
I think that is one of the, obviously one of the changes I'm going to make, because I plan on doing this race again next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already told my wife this, that I would like her there, so
Right.
that when I come out of the water and I get a drink and I say, man, it's really fucking with me today. And she says, it's okay. It's okay to be scared.
Right.
Just go get back in.
Yeah.
And just to have that, I think would help a lot. And I plan on doing a lot of extra swims by myself.
I was just going to say, if she's not available, like I'm not much in the swimming scene, but I've had experience with ultra distance. I don't mind a trip to Vancouver.
Yeah.
No,
it's pretty nice. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know, I joked about it when you came back, because maybe you should have had some like waterproof headphones there playing some nice soothing music while you swam.
Yeah.
No. Sorry.
Well, I made an Instagram post after the race, and I honestly, I didn't want to, because admitting that you failed at something isn't bad, but admitting that you gave up on something, it made me feel like a coward, and I didn't want to admit, but I knew doing that would help propel me the next time I do something like this. So getting out of the water and not getting back in, to me, felt like I was giving up on myself, when I know I can do it. It's not a physical thing for me. Like a 6 kilometer swim isn't necessarily that challenging for me. Right. But mentally, it was just like, I could swim scared. You can swim scared. And I know, like, in my logical brain, there isn't actually a shark in that water. Right. Like, there might be whales or seals or something, but those aren't going to get you. So I know, like, logically, there is nothing really to be actually scared of. So I could have just stayed in the water and done it and been scared the whole time.
I always think too, some things happen for your brain is telling you to not go back for a reason sometimes. I mean, maybe you can't rationalize it. Who knows? Maybe they're just, you could swim scared, or would you make an irresponsible decision at some point based on that irrationality that could be physically dangerous? So I don't know. Maybe you have to look at it, say, no, my body and my brain told me this for a reason. And some days it's your day and some days it's not your day, because like I said, I've had the experiences too, where even having that support there to talk about it doesn't work. And when you're done, you're done. Mm-hmm. So if it's not a physical thing, it's a mental thing, and your brain was saying, we shouldn't be doing this for some reason, just accept that it was for your own safety. Yeah.
Come back another day and do it again.
But I do want to mention too, because you did put the Instagram post, and I think you do a lot of things that I think is important that people should see and get maybe a little bit motivated too. Your Instagram is Primal Ryan.
Primal with a Y.
Primal with a Y. So you can follow
Primal Ryan.
Awesome. Yep. So you can follow him on that. He's done a lot of great things with the world of swimming and everything like that. Some of the runs we've done. Are you ever going to go back to like actually go do an ultra on your feet?
I don't know, because like when I started doing this, it was like the first race I ever did was an Ironman, a half Ironman.
That's right. I can't believe we actually skipped over that. The whole reason we
so like that was the first thing I ever did in the endurance realm, I guess. Yeah. And then it snowballed, I guess, from there. I did some long distance bikes. I did a marathon 1 year. And then I did another Ironman again last year. Yeah. And it was always the run was always not pleasant for me.
Right.
The bike was always whatever, not pleasant. But then the swim, I would always like, in both the Ironmans, I came out in the top 100
Right.
of like 1,000 competitors.
Right.
So it was like, I have a natural ability in swimming, and I actually really enjoy
Right.
like that whole process of doing it. So then I was like, that's why I started doing like the 10Ks and then built on and did the 20K last year. And I guess swimming is just something I'm more passionate about swimming than I am the other two disciplines of triathlon.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I also think Ironman might be like the pinnacle of endurance sport, because you have to do all those three facets.
Yeah, you have to be good at everything.
Yeah, I know if I swim for 45 minutes in the pool, I get out, I've got a little bit imbalance.
Yeah.
And then if you have to get on a bike right away, I'm not sure that's a good idea for me. And then after cycling for how long, you got to get out and run it out. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole different beast of endurance. So I don't know if I'll ever do it because I'm not a strong swimmer and I'm not so great on the bike.
Yeah.
But I definitely admire the people that are capable of, and it is a pretty strict time with where you have to finish on those Ironman.
It is kind of tight. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually most people are like you, to be clear. Like most people that do a triathlon or an Ironman, swimming is not their strong suit.
Right.
They are runners who learned how to bike and then forced to swim. That's the majority of triathlons. So for me, it was literally the complete opposite. But yeah.
So that's interesting, because I didn't know a lot about endurance swimming and ultra distance swimming until you had gotten into it. So it's been enlightening that way too. So okay, Ryan, I know you did a bit of your homework on this podcast. The one and only question that everybody gets.
Okay.
So you're here on a podcast called Now for Someone Completely Interesting, because I think you are completely interesting. But people sometimes want to know, who do you think would be deserving to be on this podcast and share some of their stories?
Oh, man. Somebody local?
Anybody you know. I always say, as long as it's not a celebrity, because we can always get access to celebrities, but somebody who's, kind of flies under the radar, but should have a little bit of exposure.
I mean, for me, it's always people that are into fitness and do maybe some things that aren't necessarily normal to most people.
Right.
I don't know who really fits that bill that I know in St. Paul, but
it doesn't have to be local. Like, it just.
Yeah, maybe somebody like Luke Blackburn would be.
Oh yeah,
would be really good.
Yeah.
He's a local business owner. He owns the gym, and
that's right,
and is very fitness minded as well. So
yeah,
let's go with that.
All right.
Yeah,
sounds good. Yeah, I might track him down. I know him pretty good too. There. So, all right. My guest again, my coworker friend Ryan Wilson. Thank you so much for listening, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining me on this. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you can find us through your favorite podcast provider by searching Pool and Radio or Now for Someone Completely Interesting. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram through Pool and Radio. My guest once again, lying in bed, just like
Ryan Wilson. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Thanks.